On June 26th of 2024, Volkswagen unveiled the newly updated Mark 8.5 Golf R. VW's venerable 2-liter turbocharged engine remains, but with a slight increase in power from the current car's 315 horsepower up to 328. The Mark 8.5 features new LED Plus headlights, along with a lit-up VW badge on the front, and new LED taillights. There are air curtains in the bumper, and new forged wheels are available as an option. Inside, the Mark 8.5 has an updated infotainment system with new graphics and a new menu structure for the center touch display. VW's Digital Cockpit Pro also received some updates to its capabilities. Teaser images of the Mark 8.5 showed hard buttons back on the steering wheel in place of the current model's digital sliders. However, Volkswagen decided to upgrade the digital sliders and keep them on the Golf R. The biggest letdown is the absence of a manual transmission, as the new Golf R will only be available with a 7-speed DSG. To celebrate the release of the new King of the Hot Hatch Hill, we thought we would take a look at the last 2 iterations of Volkswagen's Golf R. So buckle up and let's dive in. So, hot hatches. The perfect combination of practicality and fun to drive. You can fit adults in there, and groceries, and make your trips to the shops and do all your stuff, and then you can go out and play around and have a lot of fun. Volkswagen has been a player in the hot hatch market since its inception. And way back in 2004, things got real with the R32. That was Volkswagen's taking it to the market, putting everybody else to shame. Let's do this thing. That original R32 was a Mark IV Golf, and it had a 3.2-liter VR6, narrow angle V6 that could squeeze into the front of a Golf. Dope. That VR6 had 240 horsepower, 236 pound-feet of torque, manual transmission, part-time all-wheel drive. It was a serious player and has become somewhat of an icon. Only about 6,000 of those were ever made for the U.S. market, and it was a 1-year run. Then the Mark V Golf came out. Everybody wondered, are they going to do another R32? Yep, they sure did. It was a 1-year run in the U.S. for 2007, and they only made 5,000 of them. Still had the VR6, but it was tweaked a little bit, and now had 247 horsepower, 236 pound-feet of torque. Still manual transmission and part-time all-wheel drive. Still dope. Then the Mark VI Golf came out, and everybody wondered, oh, is Volkswagen going to do another R32? Please, Volkswagen, please. They didn't. They did something else. Sort of. They launched what is now called the Golf R. That's because that 3.2-liter VR6, of which the R32 was named after, was gone. In its place was Volkswagen's EA888 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. So from 6 cylinders down to 4 cylinders. And people were like, blasphemy! How can you do this to us, Volkswagen? How? Except that 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged was lighter and more powerful. So I couldn't wait to see that car. I couldn't wait to drive that car. I wanted that car. And on April 21st, 2011, I was in New York at the auto show when they unveiled the Mark VI Golf R for the U.S. market. That car, 2 doors, 4 doors, manual transmission only, it was awesome. So I ended up ordering a Mark VI Golf R, and on August 14th of 2012, it showed up. Rising blue, the Golf R color is sort of blue, and just a great car. In fact, I kept that car as a daily driver longer than any other car I've owned in my life. I put 60,000 miles on that car. And then my son eventually inherited it from me. After he proved he was a good driver, when he got his driver's license, like 2 years later, he got the Golf R. It was like the perfect package. 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, a little lighter, about 3,100 pounds. It had 256 horsepower and 243 pound-feet of torque. Manual transmission. The car was just phenomenal. Which is why I kept it for so long. Then the Mark 7 Golf came out, and they completely knew everything, right? It's a new Golf, like the 911. You know, they got iteration after iteration, generation after generation. So this is the Mark 7. So the Mark 7 Golf R came out in 2015. And Volkswagen really wanted to separate the R from its lesser stablemates, even the GTI. So it was more aggressive looking, whereas the previous generations were sort of a mildly tweaked body. Really, Volkswagen paid attention to the aerodynamics and all of that sort of stuff to make the 7 better than its predecessor. But I was so happy with the 6, I was like, I don't know. And when Volkswagen first launched the Mark 7 Golf R in the US, same 2-liter turbocharged engine, tweaked up to 292 horsepower, 280 pound-feet of torque. Still, all-wheel drive on demand, Haldex 4Motion all-wheel drive, sending 50% of the power to the rear axle as needed. Better chassis, stronger chassis, lots of body differences, but that first year you could only get it in 4 doors with a DSG. I'm a save the manuals kind of girl, so I was like, don't know about this, Volkswagen. But then in 2018, Volkswagen came out with an update for the Golf and the Golf R. So this is now the Mark 7.2 or 7.5, it's commonly referred to. And it was a facelift, but they added the digital cockpit and this MIB2 touchscreen that just made all the interface a little more exciting. You've got connectivity for smartphones and all that sort of stuff. And some safety features were added, like pedestrian detection, things like that. They also added adaptive front headlights with LED lights. And the kicker was Volkswagen's 6-year, 72,000-mile people's warranty. And this was kind of a, hey, we're sorry about the whole diesel thing. Our cars are still really good. Here's a better warranty. So that, and they also added, and Volkswagen also added a manual transmission back. So I was like, okay, I might need to get another Golf R. My car showed up April 3rd, 2019, and it was everything I had hoped for. This is that car. It is one of 12 Violet Touch Pearl Golf Rs in the United States. Only a few of them have a manual transmission. The others are DSG cars. These have become very desirable cars. Only a few hundred Spectrum Golf Rs were made. Spectrum was basically a paint to sample option for the Golf R. They offered 40 different colors. They had a couple different purples. And I ordered my car in Violet Touch Pearl. You've got 3 different drive modes, accessed by a mode button right down here. And I'm in Comfort right now. There's Eco, Comfort, Normal, Race, and Custom. And you could get the Golf R Mark 7 a couple different ways. You could get it a base Golf R, then you could get it with DCC, Dynamic Chassis Control, and nav. For the 7.5, you can only get it fully loaded. When the 7.5R came out in Spectrum for 2019, and the Golf Rs for 2019, the engine was re-rated. Actually, a little bit less horsepower, 288 horsepower, still 280 pound-feet of torque. Still, on-demand all-wheel drive, sending up to 50% through a multi-plate clutch of the power to the rear axle. and just a really fun, playful chassis. A really fun car. So the different drive modes in here will affect everything. You've got dynamic chassis control with drive modes. So I'm in comfort, which is the softest suspension setting, and the slowest reaction for the steering and the throttle and so on and so forth. And the car still does pretty darn well. But if I hit this and I go over to normal, things firm up a little bit. Steering becomes a little tighter. Throttle response is a little quicker. And it sounds a little better. Now, if we go into mode again, we can go to race. That's the firmest suspension setting, and the steering is now really tight. And that exhaust. This is a buttoned down chassis. This is a really fun car. Again, I get the hot hatch thing. You can still fit 4 adults in this car. About 9 bags of groceries. The hatch changed a little bit in the 7 and 7.5 from the 6. It's a little shorter, but my gosh, is this thing fun. I'll shut up so you can listen to it. But now there's a new Golf R. So I think we should take a look at that. Here we go. All right, this is it. The Mark 8 Golf R. It looks different. It looks different outside, and it really looks different inside. So, same EA 888 2-liter twin turbocharged 4-cylinder. Significant increase in power. With the manual, you get 315 horsepower, 280 pound-feet of torque. With the DSG, 315 horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque. In the last several generations of Golf R, R32 and R, the system could send 50% of the power to the rear axle. That was it. This car still does that. It'll decouple the back wheels if you're under light load, still be a front-wheel drive car, on-demand all-wheel drive. The system will send 50% of the power to the rear as needed. But, unlike previous generations, now that system can send 100% of the power at the rear axle to either wheel, depending on all kinds of stuff. Yaw, what mode you're in, speed, everything. And that'll help you carve out of corners a little faster by spinning the outside wheel a little faster to push you through that corner. Inside, you still have the 10.25-inch digital cockpit, but now you can change all the views in here. You can do 21 different viewing options for this digital cockpit. The one that I have it on is my favorite. It's a tack, big tack in the middle showing you what gear you're in with the R logo splashed on. There's G-forces on the other side, my speed on the right-hand side, but you can just tap this little thing and change really quickly, you know, what you've got in that left side, and then you hit the other button on the right-hand side of the wheel and you can change what's going on in the right-hand screen. So this is a very configurable Digital Cockpit Pro. And then a bigger screen in the middle. It's now 10 inches instead of 8 for MIB3, Men in Black 3, the multi-interface for Volkswagen. But this screen now is further away. And Volkswagen has seen fit to replace all of the buttons with haptic, touch-sensitive, capacitive things. Now the screen is okay. The screen works great, just like the last generation. The screen uses like the capacitors, like your phone, the screen on your phone, so that it's quick to react and so on and so forth. And the screen works okay, but it's further away, and I have to interact with it more. If I want to change driving modes, I've got a cool little R button on the steering wheel, which will switch modes, but the mode button is here. I touch that, and then I got to touch the screen, get the different modes. Okay, not bad. But let's talk about HVAC. Let's say you want to turn on the air conditioning. I go down here and I hit Clima. That pulls up the HVAC screen. And then I hit the power button. And then you can do auto or all the other things. Now there is some interesting stuff like the Smart Care, Smart Climate, which you can say like, I want warm hands, I want cool feed, I want fresh air, I want quick cooling, or classic climate control, or air care, which is the different like filtration systems and making the air purest that it can for you. But sticking with classic climate, there's extra steps to get into this. Here's the bad part though. Like a lot of people are doing this touchscreen thing and that's how you interact with it. I get that. But here's the bad part. There are touch sensitive buttons here for temperature. Like I can slide this to turn the temperature up and down, or I can hit this button, do that, and do that. Then there's a volume thing in the middle here to slide the volume up and down. Okay? To use this screen, I personally can't, like, especially on a bumpy road, like point accurately to the screen. So I gotta anchor my hand, and then I'm hitting things, and then I might inadvertently tap these things, turn the volume up, turn the temperature up different from what I wanted. So in a performance car, creating extra steps to interact with systems is a bad decision. Point blank. It's just a bad decision. So I'm not personally a fan of this. I like the last generation car, the 7 and the 7.5, that have the HVAC buttons down here, little knob turn up and down. You don't need to look away from the road. You can look right at you look at the road, and you can use the knobs and the buttons and all that sort of stuff because it's easy to find. So I'm not a fan of that. It also makes the cabin look a little stark. And I don't know if it's that or the materials themselves, but this car feels a little lower quality build-wise and material-wise than the last generation Golf R. The Golf R always kind of punched above. It's an expensive car, but it can play with cars that are more expensive because the materials, the fit and finish, the quality, the performance, all of that's on par with those vehicles. This one doesn't feel that way. And that's really disappointing. Some other nice touches in the new car. Sunroof. Couldn't do that in the last gen Golf R. You could in the Mark 6, but not the Mark 7. You can still get manual transmission. Thank you, Volkswagen. Save the manuals. So you have wireless charging down here in this big cubby for your phone, and then you have wireless connectivity to CarPlay and all that sort of stuff. You have heated and cooled seats. Heated seats front and back on the outside ones, and cooled on the front. And the kicker, check this out. You can do heated, again, 2 steps. In the old car, the last car, I could just hit the heated seat button. Heated and cooled at the same time. Would you ever want that? Yep, you might. So speaking of the seats, they look really cool. They hold you really nicely, just like the last ones, but now the headrest is built in. You get these cool blue highlights. The R logo is in blue, which is really neat. There's even blue highlights in the back seats, which is pretty cool. But you can't move the headrest. The headrest is now set. So this car is actually longer. It has the same wheelbase as the Mark 7, but it's a little bit longer. It's narrower and it's taller. The really interesting part is the car's a little bit longer than the Mark 7, but it has less legroom in the rear seats, the same legroom up front, and less cargo capacity in the back. I can't figure that out, but according to Volkswagen's press kits, those are the numbers. The transmission is good, the manual transmission is good, and in Volkswagen's media kit, it talks about how designers really tried to set the perfect distances between the steering wheel, the shifter, and the seat, so the driver, everything just falls to hand. Somebody got it wrong, at least for my body, because the shifter in the 7.5, the distance for that, the distance for the screen is perfect. In here, this is wrong. It's just a little bit different, and it's wrong. I also don't like the feel of this new shifter. But Volkswagen really did try to step up the performance game. Those intakes in the front, functional. The diffuser in the back, functional. That new rear wing on the back, functional. The engine doesn't sound quite as good. It's not as throaty, unless you're in race, and then it almost feels fabricated. Kind of like I was hoping they wouldn't do, but that's just the way my ears hear it. This car has several different driving modes. I've got Comfort, Sport, Race, and Custom, including one called Drift Mode, where it turns off stability control and lets you get really playful with the all-wheel drive system. So if you go into the driving modes and you go into Custom, you can actually tailor the dynamic chassis control to the most softer than Comfort or more racy than Race. That's really neat. That's a really cool feature. But we're gonna stick this in Race. So this is Race mode. Firm suspension, quicker steering, stronger response to the throttle, and that louder exhaust note. And my first reaction is that even though this engine is stronger, it's more powerful, it feels like the boost comes on later. In the last generation car, power was available from 1800 to 5500. That's like sort of the power curve there. And this car is supposed to have a flatter power curve, but really winding it up, and it just doesn't feel like it pulls as hard. And it also feels top heavy. The brakes are actually really good. They're bigger than the previous generation, like, you know, every performance car, they always get bigger, bigger, bigger. The last ones are like 13.2. These are 14.1 inch discs. It's a two-piston floating design with cross-drilled rotors now, at least at the front. And they are strong. They're easy to modulate and they feel good. There's standard IQ drive in this Golf R, just like all kinds of safety stuff. Lane keep assist and cruise control that is smart and will bring you to a stop, and you know, all of those things which you can turn off most of. But the car's really aware, and with this dynamic chassis control and this different mode setup, it really does separate character. It just doesn't feel as analog. This car feels more digital. It feels not as good. In my personal opinion, I feel like the Mark 8 Golf R is the first Golf R in the lineup for the market in the US that isn't better than the previous generation. It's an excellent car. There are so many things that are new, there's so many things that are good, but it's not better. It's not better. Sometimes new isn't better. Here's hoping that the Mark 8.5 Golf R is better.